Hey there, this is Brandon Zalinsky from P1, and you're listening to the RoboCast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Elliott64, and welcome back to the RoboCast with myself, Steve the American Killjoy, and World of Woodrow. And it's time for the 5th episode review of BattleBots 2021.
Yeah.
Still confusing. And this week
It's
we have
season
two guests.
6, Sam.
Season 6, it is, yeah.
You make it so much harder on
I
yourself.
know. I'm just trying to be proper, because that's what it says on the website, guys. Come on. This week we have two guests, as you can kind of see on the little sidebar thing. We have Anthony D'Ambrosio and Brandon Zalinsky from the P1 team. How you doing, guys?
Doing quite well, thanks for asking.
Good. I think let's talk about the elephant in the room, which I think we actually did a whole kind of recording. It was, didn't even record it. A whole speech before this recording even started. Yeah,
Yeah.
It happened, but you didn't see it. P1. Oh, let's not go too far. P1. What happened last year? Because from certainly from our point of view, it was a shame you guys didn't get in, because I feel like, when you have a positive record, I feel like you deserve a spot in the end of season bracket. And the reaction of a lot of fans and obviously, a lot of people who watch BattleBots was kind of like, P1 should have been there as well. Was it kind of heartwarming for yourselves to kind of think, okay, everyone thinks we should be there, but it just wasn't meant to be this time?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so a lot of people ask me, ask me or asked our team in general, what is it like to be at BattleBots? Because they see it on TV, and there's only so much that you really see on TV, right? So the thing with BattleBots is that, and this is what I've said a lot, is that it's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. You get the moments that are good are incredible, and the moments that are bad are just awful. And because everything's amplified, right? And it's amplified through the lens of, you have already dumped 1,000 hours into this robot and tens of thousands of dollars. Hopefully not of your own money, but a lot of people do have their own finances into this robot. And so everything that happens is amplified. And so the crazy thing about that fight in specifically is the kind of how close everything happened. The SME fight, our third fight, I mean, when you're watching it on TV, you can sometimes see it's like, oh, well, this fight happened in episode 8, and then they released the bracket episode 10, but in reality, that might have happened an hour apart. Or this fight happened in episode 10, and then they released the bracket in episode 10, and that actually happened a day and a half apart. So the crazy thing with this was that it was such a huge moment for us, and they were so close together. So I think the SME fight probably happened around 10:30, 11 p.m. We were over filming on the last day. It was after we were supposed to be done. And Tony, I believe too, he was on Pain Train last year. Tony was lined up for the Slapbox fight, and that one ended up not even happening because they canceled it. They just chopped it off the back. And
it's the last fight of the night, and they cut it. We didn't even get the fight, but we were queued up for about 4 hours ready for that fight.
Oh God.
Yeah. And so when I talk about the lowest of that's brutal, having
that's as low as it gets.
Go too long. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fight with SME happened at probably 10:30 or 11 p.m. and it was so unbelievably incredible because we had been at BattleBots for 2 years. We had applied the year before that, and we had never. First off, we'd only got our first win that year, season 5, but it was a short fight. And then we had never really had a moment that was like, this is it, we're here, And the SME fight was that and a bag of chips. And it was so fun. And so that fight ended, and then we went home, and it was probably, it ended up probably 11. We probably didn't get back until 12 or 12:30. And then the bracket came out at 1:30 or 2 a.m. So can you imagine us? We're like, oh my God, we're incredible. This is so much fun. We're going to make it in the top 32. We have a 2-1 record. This is awesome. And then the bracket comes out and we're not there. And that was pretty low. That was pretty rough. And
I think everybody team, obviously I was on Pain Train last year, but I think across the entire teams, the pits, it was kind of shocking to not see them there, considering we just saw the SME fight.
Exactly. It was so good. It was the fight of the
really,
episode for sure.
I can't even emphasize in person how much fun that match was to watch, and see SME, a robot so big, just getting picked up and kind of tossed around was incredible. It really was.
Even fans of the BattleBots calendar, it is the February picture. It's up on my kitchen wall at the minute.
That's great.
And it's just every time I see it, I go, "Nah, that's cool."
I didn't even know that. I just got sent a picture by somebody who has the calendar like 2 days ago. He's like, you're on the calendar this month, right? And I'm like,
yep,
nice.
News to me.
it was. I think the reaction from the pits matches the reaction of everyone online, because there was a big outcry to say, P1.
We saw it in the bracket. Justice for P1, right? We saw it everywhere.
I think Brandon's reaction when he lifted SME is the reaction everybody had.
Just the sheer joy.
Yeah, Greg definitely got an earful. A lot of people got an earful. I wasn't happy. But the one thing that I try to always iterate when this comes up is that I don't want to have people, because especially everyone loves to go on the internet and argue about this stuff.
Yep.
I don't like people saying, oh, this robot sucks. Like, a lot of people love to single out specific robots and be like, well, this robot sucks, they shouldn't have been in, P1 should have been in instead. And I don't like that, because everyone else worked just as hard as we did and are gracious for their opportunity to compete for the nut. And it's just stinks when people go on and like, well, this robot sucks, you should be in instead. Like, no, it's like, we should have been, I personally believe that we should have been in, but I don't want to single out specific robots or teams or people and go, well, these robots stink, we shouldn't have them in.
Of course.
And so as I say, at the event, and then the other crazy thing too was after the bracket came out, we were still on the hook because we might have fought. Hypershock and Gruff were both not ready. Hypershock was overweight. Oh no, Gruff was overweight and Hypershock wasn't ready. And so we were in backstage in the green room, ready to fight either Hydra or Bloodsport, or exactly, Hydra or Bloodsport. And if
it's not a nice feeling, really, is it? Like, of all teams, we'll fight either one of these two, like, the top two.
Yeah, exactly. Hydra, I think would have been tough. I mean, I don't like getting really sweaty with the wedge game, and Hydra is the best ground game there. So it's hard to. I mean, it would have been a really, really hard fight. I think the only chance we would have had is if we had gotten to a side and just rolled them over, and if they had broken or something. But I mean, Bloodsport is kind of the robot we're designed to fight against. So I was like, damn, if we could fight Bloodsport, that would be pretty cool, because I thought we would have more than a puncher's chance against Bloodsport. But anyway, so that ended up not happening. Gruff ended up cutting weight, and Hypershock was ready, and so those fights happened, and we were done. And yeah, like I said, it was really low. And then when they filmed, I think it was going back to the point of how close together or far apart things are. I think it was helped by the fan reaction, was helped by the fact that it was our fight was in episode 10, and then they immediately came out the brackets and we weren't in it. Yeah. So that kind of was, and it also probably the reason why Hypershock was probably singled out was
they lost in that episode as well, didn't they?
Yeah, and they got crushed by Endgame too. So it was Hypershock gets crushed by Endgame. We have a really cool fight against me, and then they're in it, we're not. And I think that's most of the reason why the fan reaction was the way it was.
It's interesting, really, because if you look at such things as the strength of schedule and everything that the selection committee should be looking at, it's really odd, because though Hypershock lost to a high-end robot, Endgame wasn't yet a high-end robot. It had done well in that season, but hadn't won a championship yet. So you couldn't really call it one of the sort of major players. It was one of the top four, perhaps, in the seedings, but that was only after they had that match with Hypershock. Whereas, P1 fought Copperhead, Smee, and
Kronos.
Who was the third? Kronos,
yeah, the unaired fight.
Kronos showed in previous years that it could be a really devastating bot. I mean, it wrecked Copperhead. So, you beat the thing that beats you. Are you better than it? Who knows? But yeah, the strength of schedule is a really weird one to balance and play with. I mean, Gruff had a fight against Extinguisher, which it lost. Extinguisher didn't do so well that season, so perhaps you weigh it up that way as well. But yeah, it is, I feel, interesting, and I would have really liked to have known the sort of why they made the choices they did, as opposed to here you go, now fight about it.
Yeah, I
we-
mean,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm a bit of a data junkie. I had all like the teams written out and like what their records were and who they had fought and written down. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, why are we not in this? It was
Especially
brutal.
at 2-1.
Some parts of the
where they
bracket
were-
are a complete mystery. Some parts of the
Yeah.
bracket. Yeah.
The what I heard, so I had a chat with Greg Munson, Aaron Catling, and Peter Abramson after that, and the general gist was that this me fight was incredible, but they didn't have confidence in us being able to win 5 fights and win the nut. And that's like what they wanted to see in order to put teams in. So that was the directly from them what the reasoning was. I disagreed with it, but
that is flimsy as hell.
And we covered that a little bit in our round of 32 breakdown
we-
last year with Pete.
We spoke with Pete last year, and he kind of said something similar in the sense that any team that wants to be in that kind of end bracket needed to be something that they thought could win, feasibly win, which, not that P1 couldn't at the time, but I feel like if it's a toss-up between Gruff, Hypershock, and P1, which I think is mostly what kind of people were saying at the time, of the three at the time, P1 maybe had the lowest reputation. Like, I don't know how fair that is, but like it's at the time I feel that's maybe the reason why they went that way. But in hindsight, you look back and think it had a positive record. You can't really ignore that, can you?
yeah,
It's one of the
No,
worst parts about sports, though. Where you gotta make a cutoff somewhere. You can't just have every team in the playoffs. You've just described every argument for expanding
be
every
fair-
Well, the
playoffs
problem
in
is
every
other
sport ever.
other sports go by records. So
It's true.
Right.
And-
Yeah, and there's a lot
Yeah.
more. There's a lot more matches. So.
We've had much to say in the past about
Yeah.
win and you're in fights and things like that.
Oh.
How we dislike them, and
Yeah, very much
yeah,
so.
the strength of schedule
And-
should be the thing they look at. But
the tough thing here too is that cutting from 4 fights to 3, it makes it so
Gives you
much
less
harder.
chance. Yeah.
Yeah, in 2019 we had 4 fights. Well, we didn't, but teams that were competitive had 4 fights, and it gives so much more granularity to the bracket. They did 4 fights and then a top 24, if I recall correctly,
Yeah.
and it made it a lot easier because in the three fight system, it's a lot easier to just like kind of either skate through or have it's just a lot harder to separate the bracket and kind of make a list rather than just like blobs of teams, so if that makes
you
sense.
get a better sampling of performance with more matches, obviously. So
Of course.
Yeah.
and what it did mean, we got 2 more awesome fights in the Bounty Hunters, where obviously the amazing sportsmanship from P1 against Tracer, and then just the balls to the wall match against Scorpios, which was so much fun to watch.
I'd flip them 5 seconds sooner.
What could have been? What could have
Yeah.
been?
Yeah, we were in the Ice Wave bracket, another robot that I thought we had more than a puncher's chance against.
Yeah.
I thought Scorpios was the hardest, the biggest like challenge to us in
Yeah.
that bracket. Who was the finalist? Who did they beat?
Hypershock. That'd have been funny, wouldn't it?
Was it?
It was. Yeah.
Hypershock
Yeah,
was
but
there.
Hypershock was having real trouble last year. Just like
Yeah,
they seemed like it was. This year they had all their stuff together, but last year it was
it
a
was a rocky
little
road.
Yeah, they had
little
trouble
rockier
existing.
for them.
Let's talk about this year. I
Yep.
think it's we've gone on a long time about last year, which for good reason. It's very interesting. I think lessons can be learned from what happened last year for sure, but it's the here and now. What did you do to give them no excuses this time? What changed between P1 in 2020 to 21?
Well,
Apart from
I
just Anthony
certain-
coming on the team, of course.
yeah. So Anthony came on. He did a great job this year with a lot of our aesthetic stuff. The marketing, and he runs, if you aberrantrobotics.com/merch, check it out. We have robot parts for sale. He handles that all completely himself, and it's something that's extremely helpful because it's like we have so much other stuff to do. It's like handling merch and stuff is like, I have all this other stuff. I don't even want to deal with that at the end. There you go.
there it is. Hey.
And so
Ooh, fancy.
having somebody who's experienced in that and like that's kind of what he does is so incredible. As far as the robot goes, I think that's the main personnel change. We didn't have a lot of other people in or out. Evan Arias from Pain Train helped out for a while, but then they got in so that he went out and built his own robot. But as far as the robot goes, I wanted to keep the same general look. I didn't want it to change wildly. At least this year, I wanted to basically kind of top out what we could do with this like archetype with a 4-wheel drive, kind of classic wedge, and kind of go from there. So internally, the drivetrain is exactly the same functionally. The drive gearboxes were redesigned quite a bit to encourage serviceability. They're a lot better designed now. Excuse me. But it's all the same reduction, same wheel size, same everything. So the robot's the exact same speed, same torque. The robot is designed to spin the tires with another robot on top of it. So that's why it's like you'll see us talking about other fast robots, us, Claw Viper, Hypershock, robots like that. They're probably all in the same range. We're not like excessively faster than anybody else. That's because we tried to do that in 2019 and we're too fast and it's uncontrollable. And then also the torque is a huge part of it. Because we want to be able to lift somebody and still be just as maneuverable. So, like I said, we can still spin the tires. We're still traction limited with another robot on top of us. So, aside from that, like the lifter got a couple big upgrades too. We were snapping shafts off of our output gearbox. That got fixed. The wedge, actually, probably the biggest change was actually something that came pretty late, which was the wedge. The wedge against Copperhead, if you recall, if you look at the very end of that fight, actually the reason why the robot broke was Copperhead punched the wedge off of its moorings and the whole front left side of the wedge comes up like this. There's these tabs that come back from the wedge and it jammed up into the drivetrain because there's a sprocket there and jammed the whole drive side and we couldn't move. So we decided all right, and we had like 14 bolts, 14 3/8 in American units, bolts in the wedge, and he sheared like 12 of them. And we were like, all right, this just isn't acceptable. It's like we're gonna have this massive steel plow and it comes off. And I mean, when we were in that fight, my last memory before the robot broke was keep the wedge on the robot, otherwise you're going to be in every BattleBots promo for the next 3 years. So,
Jack.
I mean, it stayed on. It just went 3 inches back.
Jack Tweedy.
Yeah. So that was a big focus of the redesign. And we went from like 14 or 16 3/8 bolts to we switched to a design that the understructure of the wedge, instead of having like tabs that slot into the chassis, instead it has like big like cups essentially that encapsulate the whole front of the chassis. So you have to like scoot the wedge onto the robot, and then there's two like big honking 1-inch diameter bolts that hold it on, and then all 1/2 inches from the bottom, sides, and top. So it was the bolts are loaded a lot better and they're way bigger. And we did not have the wedge come off this year.
Well,
so
I mean, it was tested very early on.
It was increasingly difficult to take it on and off after fights if it got any hits. Yeah, but it was good.
I mean, it certainly lasted against Valkyrie. I mean, that was.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been a real shot in the arm, because you saw your reaction after the fight where you're just like, "Oh my god, we did it!" You know.
Yeah.
That must have felt pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that was the crazy thing is that a lot of people who maybe don't watch BattleBots that much or aren't as into combat robots, they see, I believe before that fight especially, they see like Valkyrie, which is a name they know, and P1, which is a name they probably don't know. And be like, well, Valkyrie's probably going to win. But we didn't feel like we were an underdog because the robot archetypes, like it's a brutal first match for Valkyrie.
Yeah.
To give them probably the only lifter, probably one of, if not the heaviest wedge in the entire event. And then not only that, but also can completely hide the weapon. Yeah. If you're a Vert, or if you're Claw Viper or Big Dill or any other like claw lifter, it's kind of sitting on top of your robot. So if you're fighting Valkyrie and they ride up the wedge, they're going to take the weapon out. We can hide the weapon completely and just go wedge mode until their weapon breaks. So that was part of it. Was I was like, this is a pretty good matchup for us. We really kind of have to win this, and we did. And it was just like
euphoria.
It was a weight off our shoulders. It was a little jarring when we got you're fighting them first and went, oh no, and then you sit down and like analyze, like this is actually probably the best thing that could happen to us, to be honest with you. So
yeah,
it was like giving Tombstone Shrederator in its first fight. Like, yeah, Shrederator doesn't have the greatest record, but you know what? Meta-wise, it's actually a really tough matchup for them. And as was seen, weird things happen, obviously. So
totally.
In the box.
You and the Valkyrie team are reasonably good friends, or you have people who know each other in the pits, and
that's the funny thing too, is that they didn't play this up on the TV at all, but they have a video of P1 and Valkyrie sparring from last year that I gave them. I wanted them to use it, they didn't use it, unfortunately. And then and also the other thing too, I mentioned this in one of my interviews, they didn't run it, but we were in the same rented house in Vegas.
We stayed with each other for 3 weeks.
Yeah, we were sharing a house the whole time. So it's like we're obviously extremely close. Fred and I are very close, especially. I mean, Fred and like there's team members between each teams that are dating. It's like there's close relationships between the two teams. And
my daughter's actually Valkyrie's #1 fan. There's actually videos and pictures of her like at the builds with them before I jumped on P1, which is kind of funny. So yeah, there's a lot of interaction. Plus we're all local. We're all up here from the Northeast, so we all hang out, like all the time, help each other on robots and things like that. So it's New England luckily is very tight knit, the Boston area, New Hampshire, like North Shore. So yeah, we see each other a lot. So honestly, you're happy for your friends if they win or lose or whatever, it's kind of at the end of the day, you're going to go back, have a beer, Yeah. So
good stuff.
Very wholesome.
Absolutely.
I guess.
Let's talk about some fights. Obviously, we spent a while talking about P1, which I could talk about P1 all day. I love it.
This is true.
But actually, before we do,
race car robot.
Exactly. Well, there's two things I have to ask. One, will you ever change the livery? Because I like the Gulf. Think about the Gulf colors are pretty special, but any temptations?
Can we raise hell and praise Dale?
Yeah. So Brandon and I are both huge car guys too. So it's one of these things that it's not just like, we love all motorsports. Like I've got, muscle car, Brandon's got the Jeep Comanche, like, we've got these little weird niche. We love racing. So yeah. So, that was one thing that we bonded over a little bit when I jumped on. It was kind of cool that we could connect over that. But this, obviously the Gulf livery is such an iconic racing, it's, you look at it immediately go.
There's P12. Yeah, the
Marlboro.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I have a stack of robots, and this was.
Yeah, I did just see a Star Child fly past. Yeah, very excited.
So yeah, that's. This is probably my favorite one. I think if we did anything else, this would be my first. This would be my first pick. Nice. I like this. The Dale Earnhardt one was also hilarious. I love that so much.
Big up Charlie.
I did see that. Yeah, that was really cool. That one was good. We've talked about doing the Mazda 787B.
Yes,
the green and orange one.
Oh, that's the one I wanted.
We've talked about a lot. It's just especially with the smaller ones.
Yeah, the tough thing is though, you look at anybody that looks at that goes, that's a race car. So you need to find another livery that will connect with people. And if you go too like niche, it's kind of hard to connect. So
no, you're right. Yeah. You're right.
There's also the thing about sort of branding and how you've now got this robot as a brand that BattleBots use and is instantly recognizable and everything. And how do you then go about about changing the color scheme?
Right.
Yeah.
We got a whole lot of blue shirts in stock right now. So
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing now is that people actually know what this robot is. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see going forward what we do. There's a lot of stuff still up in the air as far as what we do next year. It's like whether there's a million questions. So we'll see.
The true at heart always knew what this robot was, so don't sell yourself short.
It's very true. Let's talk about some fights. We'll talk about the YouTube exclusive from last week because it is very quick. First of all, which was Retrograde and Rampage.
Retrograde one. Let's.
Yep.
Yeah. God bless Rampage for trying, but
oh god, what happened?
It was a bit of a mismatch, wasn't it?
They've got the horns and everything. It should work inverted, and it doesn't work inverted. Instead, it just sort of got stuck with its wheels in the air, and you've got to really question why.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
I don't know how this happens. I don't know how something like this happens, where you don't. I don't know, man. Or like you don't. It's not even like you don't test it. It's just like it just. I don't know.
I guarantee that they have tested it. It's driven upside down, and they've just fallen poorly. Yeah. And it's just a weird balance thing, and now they're 0-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Retrograde.
It looks like the wheels are all over, because if you're doing that, you should have the chassis, and then the wheel should like extend beyond the chassis.
Like a fatter tire in the back.
Yeah, and it looks like
Yeah.
it does it, but yeah,
Mhm.
that's just rough. That fight was, I mean,
Was it a
Pete's,
fight?
Pete's interview before the fight, I'm like, oh geez.
He seems very uninvested in it.
Pete did not seem like he wanted to be chatting.
Yeah,
if I had to guess, it was probably 11:45 at night, and they were just done. And Pete was just like, "Get me through this fight. I want to go home and go to bed."
Yeah.
But that was tough. I was like, "Oh man, Pete."
I mean, the family that operates Rampage, they are awesome, and they're super excited to be there, and it's always been a good interaction last year and this year. When I any interaction you have with them, so it's cool to see them there, and they show up and they're just like, "We're ready to fight when you need us." So I mean, it's cool that they involve their whole family with it. But I do agree, like it is it's a little tough. I mean, to go out like that real fast, So
And the bots
they love P1 too. They have come, like, always come up to me, and they're like, "Oh, so how do your tires made? Like, how was your?" I was interested. I was funny. I had a chuckle this year because it's like I looked at their wedge and I was like, "Oh, that looks familiar," because they came up last year and I was like, "Oh, how was your wedge made?"
Oh dear.
Retrograde
learn from the best.
Works very nicely, and the suplex and the spinner on the back that's just taking tires.
It's a very cool and ambitious design. Like it didn't really get to show it off all that much in this match, but it is, from an engineering standpoint, very cool because it kind of combines a couple of different things, and if functionally it works the way that they want it to work, it's awesome. Unfortunately, they just couldn't show it off in this fight. That's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Good weapon synergy robots are nice, and they're needed. It's just I feel like even back in like the classic days of both the British and the American shows, it's nice to see a robot that can handle one or two weapons. It's a balance, because you want to either put all of your weight into one weapon or be able to do both. So you either become like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of robot, or you're able to really do well.
Find the balance.
Or find a neat balance.
Your mortises and your hydras of robot wars,
exactly.
Sort of
Hydra robot wars. That is a whole different thing.
It is a whole different thing. Let's talk about episode 5's fights. Then we'll start off with fight number 1, which was free shipping and uppercut. Boom! I mean, I'm sure they only put this fight in because there was a chance that the fuel tank might blow up again. And there it was.
What a trademark move to have.
I know.
Just blow people up.
Hello, we're Team Uppercut, and we blow robots up.
It was.
I mean, when you see an exposed, hose for the gas, I mean, it's almost a no-brainer that you're going to put them against each other, right?
It's like a moving target, just going, there it is, there it is, there it is.
I will say, I was very impressed that free shipping got underneath Uppercut initially, and I was kind of thinking, oh my god, it's doing it. But
I remember saying when I started watching this fight and went, I think this is going to be all-way one-way traffic, and it gets up the wedge and then bounces off across here, and I'm like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that when you're driving a lifter, when you're driving a lifter against a vertical spinner, you have to be perfect. And that's the tough thing about BattleBots right now, is verts don't break anymore. No. I mean, there's certainly instances where they do, but like, this isn't like season 1 or 2, or even going back to the previous seasons where they hit you twice and then they break, especially the good vertical spinners. They'll go the whole time. I don't know if you noticed that we'll obviously get to it, but Witch Doctor was knocked out at the end of their fight and their weapon was still going. It's like, gosh. So it's like, you have to be perfect. And when it's like, free shipping kind of won that first exchange, it was like, oh man, is this going to happen? And then lost the second exchange, and it was over. Thing that blows me away about free shipping is how big it is. It's huge.
It's massive.
It's enormous.
It's like a train.
The one thing too with Uppercut, I mean, it's very powerful. It's a terrifying robot. But it's how they recover and rebound after the initial hit. They tumble, whatever. They immediately can square back up and engage. Yep. And not a lot of verticals can do that. To kind of get yourself settled again, to go right back at it. They're very good at squaring back up and re-engaging. And you see it with the Sawblaze fight last year. Like, immediately could square up and engage again. And that's exactly what they did with free shipping. The initial hit, they went tumbling, and then as soon as they got their bearings, that was it. I mean, that it was game over.
I must admit, I did feel my $5 burn up in this fight. Just
quite literally in this case. For those online calling for it as a simultaneous incapacitation when Uppercut's wheel was dead on one side, come on, man.
Now you're just nitpicking.
You saw a bomb go off in the arena. Come on now, there's no need for that. It's Uppercut had the fight won.
Yeah.
Even if it was, they still would have won on damage. alone.
Exactly.
It wouldn't
Exactly.
have mattered.
Because
It really
simultaneous knockout goes to the judges anyway. So
Yes.
yeah, it would.
Just
wouldn't
watching
matter.
this
saving
clip back
everyone
again.
time.
Yeah.
I have
Time
the
is
clip
money.
up here. The side panel, when that blade hits, and just all of a sudden there's just this burst of flame just goes everywhere. It fills the whole screen. It's beautiful.
My thing that I picked up from after the big hit was the fact that free shipping just shot forwards and like
Yes.
it was kind of like it was being pushed by the weapon. I don't know if that's.
I
what
mean,
was
Yeah, I mean,
happening,
it might have turned it turned into a rocket, honestly.
In one of
Yeah.
the slow-mo shots, like Uppercut hits it, the big fireball comes up, and then it disperses, and free shipping's just gone.
There's a little
like,
tornado.
what just
There's a little
happened?
tornado of fire too in the middle.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. The slow mo was really
Yeah.
neat.
It's real nice. It's impressive from Uppercut. You know, it's kind of weird that they. This is obviously never any shade to Garage or free shipping. But like free shipping has never been that competitive at BattleBots, and you know it feels a bit strange to me that.
I don't think it's ever meant to be, though. To
No,
be
it's
honest.
not. But like Uppercut last year was seed fourth. It feels
Yeah.
kind of strange that they kind of give it to them. But I mean, do you know what? It made a great spectacle, and who cares?
I think
right?
they gave it because fire,
exactly.
and they wanted to see if they could get their money's worth, and they did.
And they did.
It's expensive to run that arena. You want to get as much as you can out of it as you can, you know, at one time.
Yeah.
It's very true. It's very true. Fight number 2 was a all-axe affair between Blacksmith and Shatter. Can I just say, Shatter fans rejoice
Oh,
again? It
Oh, yeah.
was wonderful to watch. Big
Ruined my predictions this week. It's the only one I got wrong.
It was spectacular. I mean, that first hit from Blacksmith, by the way, where it kind of bends the whole Mary special out of the...
Yeah.
It was a big chunk that was kind of... I don't know what angle it was at.
It was
It
all-
wasn't straight anymore.
Sort of skew if, I think, is the technical term. Going into that fight, and just
I really did like the Mary special had like overkill vibes. from
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I love that, and it was functional. I mean, the teeth on it did do what they were supposed to do.
they
I mean,
did it. They caught the weapon belt,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which was just beautiful, lovely snipe shotting once again from Shatter.
Yeah.
We saw it in fight 1 against Sub-Zero. Seen it again. They're just so on point with that hammer.
Yeah, I mean, it was critical. I thought if they didn't get the weapon, they were if they hadn't they might have clipped it again. Like, I guess my point is, if they hadn't gotten it there, they might have gotten it later. But
Right.
if they didn't get the weapon out, I thought that Blacksmith probably would have won it. So getting a
because-
snipe shot like that was utterly critical.
You've got to look at why Blacksmith changed weapon type, because they weren't getting the damage points over a spinner in a fight.
Mhm.
So they've now got the spinner, taking that out, and Blacksmith is back to not winning judges' decisions again.
Unfortunately.
Isn't that heartbreaking?
Yeah.
Crazy. But I mean, is this kind of like a passing of the torch though, a little bit from hammer to hammer? Like, because I think that Shatter's kind of. I mean, when you're looking at hammers, it's
the best.
Gotta be
I
argued
think
it's
we
the
said,
best.
yeah, we said last year that Shatter is the Premier League of hammers now, because it,
Yeah. Well, they
it
made the
got
final
first
8
in
last year.
competition. Yeah.
So, I mean, they're on the up and up. So, I mean, it's to the moon from here. They just
Only good
really
things
need
can
to.
come.
Yeah, they just need to keep it up and just, you know.
It also goes to show that
protect the safe
Hammerbots. Yeah, Hammerbots just. There was a time where people were going, "Oh, what's the point in building them?" This is the point of building them, because Shatter is finding the weaknesses.
Mhm.
It's doing it just beautifully.
It was the setup that kind of got me. Was like every single bit of Shatter's setup in this fight was interesting. So you had the forks with the kind of the protrusions on the top, so that they couldn't be
Yeah, the very long social distancing forks.
very
Yeah.
long. Yeah, but also it was the fact they could hold them at a distance with the little protrusions on the top, and there's also
Yeah.
the sidearm. I want to say had foam underneath it.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
it's layered. So it was metal on top. I can't remember what. Then a foam layer, and then their normal UHMW.
It's just
tops.
clever. Like every little detail is kind of accounted for. Obviously, I know all teams do this and kind of play the game sort of thing and make different decisions, but
Mhm.
It's crazy to
was
think that
just
they've
so
made
clever.
weight for it as
Yeah.
well, because the Mary Special can't be a lightweight weapon. Let's be real. So yeah, it's mad that they've managed to armor it up quite so nicely.
And you talked about it last week a little bit with JMO. I did listen to that episode. Haha. Sorry, I missed out on that. Work took precedence, unfortunately. The teams are starting to explore more than just let's make the hardest impenetrable box and put it out there. It's more let's find more compliant materials. Let's find things that can actually absorb, instead of just being, just that it can really take up a hard punch and then come out the same way it went in. More have have materials that could actually, maybe ablate or just take a hit, and then you could replace it later. But the thing is, your main body is still alive, and that's one thing about Shatter that's nice too, is that they have their unibody, really tough shell underneath all these really armor panels. They're a bot that takes into account having the defense that could also be removable, that you can also add on or remove or replace, or it's not just one big shell. Like for Duck, for instance, it's a unibody shell. It's meant to take a beating, but it takes too much of a beating, you got to replace that whole shell. So with Shatter, it's nice to see that the idea is just interchangeable panels and be able to survive a fight without having to make an impenetrable box, just the hardest material possible, everything AR. So strange how things have evolved, where people are kind of starting to like rediscover plastics and rediscover compliant materials to armor their machines. It's interesting, and it was a shame that Blacksmith lost their weapon so soon. This was a battle of reach. I feel like I should have seen that.
I was just thinking why Blacksmith chose the fork setup that they did, and I think it's just so that they had that reach of the hammer saw, the power hammer, if you will.
But Shatter had the longer weapon.
They did indeed, and
they, even hitting backwards, they had the they could do that, which was
that was a scream. I love that.
Good. I love it. It was just like it gives them other strategy options as well, though, because you now got to think, oh, actually, I can't just go around the back of Shatter. Not that it's easy to do that because of their Omni wheels anyway, but
old school terahertz vibes.
Yeah.
A lot of old school in this.
Another reason
battle.
why I love it. Another reason why
talk about Shatter with the overkill blade. I like to think that Blacksmith is like New Age Vlad with an overhead.
It is. Every fight it seems to get more Vladdy, doesn't it?
It's interesting, and I just if you just put your finger over and take the overhead off and just motorize those forks, it could be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely one of an older shape. You don't see robots that are shaped like that anymore.
No, definitely not. Well, let's talk about robots that are new shaped, and it's your fight. It's P1 versus Jaeger. Now, I want to give a big shout out to the Jaeger team, because God bless them, they had a rough old time getting ready, because half the team didn't turn up because they weren't able to travel, and they ended up with two out of three robots that were able to run, and they had to kind of form a team on site. And
you know what? I want to just say this before we even get started. It's a shame that they didn't give credit to the guys that stepped up to help that team. They didn't show the walkout. They didn't really acknowledge there were other people. But Manny, Randy Farmer, everybody that was involved. There's a lot of people. It took a village to kind of get this off the ground. But those guys really stepped up, and it was really great to see them get them out there and fighting.
Of course, Emmanuel Carrillo of Big Dill fame. We haven't seen Big Dill fight yet, but here he is doing some Jaeger stuff.
It was great. What was the kind of strategic approach of this? Because obviously it's two robots. Well, in this case, three, but it was two big boys and obviously the little D2.
I think that was War Stop, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, the thought going into it was to actually use the weapon as much as we could. Typically, the strategy with P1 is to YOLO into their weapon until it breaks and then use the weapon. But this one, we're like, okay, we can actually go into this fight and whip the lifter around quite a bit. And the beginning of the fight, when we got submarined, I was really spooked. Like, that was not good. And because I mean the War Stop or whichever it is really, really stinking powerful. And I was like, this isn't good. And then they clipped it when they took so they did clip it. For people who are wondering, they did clip our left rear wheel chain. The wheel was still free and spinning, but it was not powered. So if you watch in the fight, occasionally when I'm like in close and I can't like get up to speed, it's like punching to the side, and that's why, because I only have one wheel on one side. So
powerful little overhead, that thing.
It was the undercutter that got it, wasn't it? The undercutter.
Yeah, it was the undercutter who took the left rear out. Yeah.
The overhead got the right rear.
The overhead caught armor, didn't it?
Yeah, the overhead missed. They were going for both our rear wheels, and the overhead missed. He hit our top armor. We had our like original like Sawblaze Scorpios configuration in for that fight, which was short forks, and we also ran the short forks because they had the horizontal, because we didn't want to run long forks against the horizontal. But we also had, because our top plate is either 16th inch titanium or 3 mil AR normally, depending on who we're fighting. And then we can add on top of that another 3/16 of an inch of AR. And so that was what we ran against Jaeger. We're like, all right, well, they will never get through this, so we'll run this in the short forks, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah,
and once that happened,
he bounced right off of that.
Yeah.
When he hit it.
But he did put a nice little mark in it, and we gave him the tire that he broke after the event, so he got that. And yeah, so once we got off the mini bot, it wasn't too bad. And I was just kind of like driving at robots, and then the hammer saw ended up on top of me, and I was like, all right, get off of me. And he ended up upside down. I was like, okay, well, we just have to beat a horizontal that's half the weight of Valkyrie. So I was like, all right, sounds good.
One thing that was really to our benefit, though, is that because we kind of got high centered, the count started because they had to free us. So the horizontal inadvertently had to make that cut. And by doing that, it pretty much disabled the mini bot.
Yeah, a little sacrifice there.
Way more breathing room at that point. Like, we have to worry about 3. We just had to worry about 2, and then it was 1. So
yeah.
And
upper deck comes into play.
Almost got a knockout on it, but not quite.
Yeah,
which is
that
different than any other spot in the arena? Because if you stay anywhere in 10 seconds or 20 seconds in the arena,
I suppose it helped in this fight in that it got caught on the way down, and so it just lifted the wheels up, and that was panic central for Jaeger at that point.
And then we got their mini bot stuck to our wedge.
That was so good.
That was fun. That was actually my favorite part of the fight was. When they got down and I realized, because I was trying to like feed the mini bot into the screws, and he like bounced off one of the screws. He like kind of hit it and like came back, and he was just like thump. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is this now. And then it was Luke who was next to me who noticed that he was, because with the way that BattleBots is set up now with the COVID protocols and such, there's a Lexan panel between the two teams, which can get kind of silly because a lot of the times teams shake hands afterwards anyway, but that's neither here nor there. What it really means is that communication between teams and between referees is really, really freaking difficult. It's really hard because the refs can talk to each other on their headsets, but I can't talk to their driver, and their refs can't talk to each other, like aside from the headsets. So it's really, really tough because there would be normally I'd be able to hear the count out, but I can't. So it's a situation where you have much less information than you normally would have. Even in season 5, when they had the refs and the opposite corner, when they were counting, they had like speakers, and both, at least in our fights, both drivers could hear when somebody was being counted out. So it was a little bit more information there, but once Luke pointed out, he's like, he's off. I was like, oh, no way. And so I saw the mini bot on the front. I was like, all right, well, let's just feed this into the horizontal. So that was fun.
It was great. It kind of reminded me, this is a very niche reference, but it reminded me of the FIFA World Cup, the Soccer World Cup of about 8 years ago, when like there's a locust that got stuck on someone's shoulder. And it was massive, and that's what it reminded me of. I don't know why. 2-0. Nice surprise, or kind of thinking, okay, on to the next one. Let's make it 3.
A lot better than 0-2. I'll tell you that much.
It feels pretty good to win. That's for sure.
Yeah, winning is winning is fun. I'll take winning over getting smoked and losing every time. It was. As far as the way we were looking at it, the first 2 fights, like I mentioned earlier, it's like the Valkyrie fight. At least I personally felt like this was. I was feeling pressure. I felt a lot of pressure for these first 2 fights because I was like, Valkyrie fight. It's like, this is kind of what this robot is designed for. Like, names aside, we kind of have to win this fight. So we won that fight, and then this fight, I was like, damn, like we really should win this fight. Like we are designed like I don't think their hammer saw can penetrate anything on our top because we have like a ton of AR. There's no way they can go through that, and the horizontal is what we're designed to fight against. So it's like, man, we really kind of have to win this one too. So when we did that, I felt a lot better because I don't know. At the end of this fight, I was like, all right, they're not gonna season 5 us again. We're going to be in because we beat Valkyrie, who is the most destructive robot in 2020.
Yeah, it's a big name to get rid of.
Yeah. So it's like we have a huge win over Valkyrie. So it's like because 2020 was obviously Smee and Kronos, which massive respect to them, but they didn't win most destructive in that year, you know. So the getting that out of the way, I was like, all right, win over a big name. And then now we're 2-0. So it's like, all right, I don't even care who we fight. Let's have fun. Your best.
Well, the thing is, after winning 2 fights, not to say that Valkyrie wasn't a contender, do you have this like not even suspicion, just like this eventuality that you're gonna fight somebody that's really gonna give you a really good test before the bracket? Like, do you think they're going to give you somebody really, really tough in this?
Oh yeah,
fight?
totally. I thought for sure we would get another 2-0 robot or maybe a 1-1, but I thought for sure we would get, even if it was a 1-1, I thought it would be a 1-1 like Hydra or something, you know?
Someone just like it just happened to be, you know, that a bot had to lose in a fight, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, is Witch Doctor 1-1 right now?
Yes.
I think because they lost against Endgame and
they
they beat somebody else earlier, I think. Yeah. So yeah, Doc, exactly. So it's like, it's like, all right, 2-0, you're facing a 1-1, but it's Witch Doctor. Have fun, you know?
Right.
So I figured that would be what we get. And like kind of looking forward, I was like, all right, if we're 2-0 and then we get Witch Doctor, and if we win, we're probably like the 2 seed. But if we lose, we're still in, you know? So it's like they're not gonna kick us out after beating Valkyrie and losing to Witch Doctor. So
it's a pleasant position to be in.
One thing too that was a little bit of a relief is, I mean, the Valkyrie fight was a grinder, and I mean, it was a lot of damage, a lot of repairs. And we did bring spares and, you know, enough chassis and stuff. But we didn't take a lot of damage in this fight, which was great because it didn't chew up a lot of repair parts and spares that we brought. So we'd be way better prepared for whatever's coming down the road. So I think that we felt a little bit more confident after this one for sure. Without eating up, you know, 2 full robots, that would have been bad.
Yeah, for sure. Fight number 4 then, we've mentioned Hydra. Let's talk about this fight with Gruff, and let's reset that days before controversy timer again because well,
oh boy.
We've seen some posts on Reddit from some of the teams as well. You know, Shatter and Hypershock have given their thoughts on the out of the arena rules. Well,
for those not in the know, shall we educate? So,
please.
This season on BattleBots, rules were put in place to prevent ooters for safety reasons. I can see why they would do it. At the same time, I could see why not. Basically, you're not allowed to ooter anyone. They sealed off most of the ooter slots, but there's the areas by the doors, the corners, strange enough, where Gruff ended up, and those areas aren't meant to be used for ooters. If that happens on purpose, the aggressor is disqualified, and the robot that got thrown out of the arena wins the fight. If it was an accident, it goes to a judge's decision. This was no accident.
I think we chalk this up as a case of the oopsies.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, really, that rule change. I mean, you can imagine how elated I was as a lifter driver.
Oh
yeah. Wonderful.
We're giving you the upper deck instead. No, thank you.
We've spoken to both Jake and to Aaron Hill from earlier this season, and basically Aaron's way of looking at it was, screw you guys, I hate everything you've done to the arena, and we've just bought a flipper. How could you?
I think for the whole event leading up to that, we were all just waiting for the first person to do it. I mean, honestly, we were waiting for the first person to do it to kind of see how it would happen. Out.
Yeah,
and
it was going to happen eventually, whether it be accidental or oopsie.
Yeah.
So
how it plays out, and watching it back over and over again on the Hydra Facebook page, there's a lovely shot where Gruff goes out of the arena, and then you just see Trey Roski walk very quickly away from the incident. And you're just sort of like, yeah, you keep walking.
Well, ironically enough, it was really the reasoning they gave was just like you said, is so they could get in case there's a fire. And ironically, the fire was in front of the door.
Yeah, Gruff was on fire.
Literally a
and
worst case scenario, honestly.
This is what you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing was, and there was a huge builders meeting in Vegas with everybody and chatting about, I mean, the whole multitude of things, but this was one of them, and this was before the whole event. And one of the questions was, I mean, because if you recall in the finals of last season, how did Endgame beat Whiplash? Like,
yeah,
they put him right there. So the question was, if that happens, and is Whiplash champion? Like, and we never really got a straight answer, and then we got our answer here. So
for me, I look at this as, from an audience point of view, if Hydra dominates the fight as it was doing at that point, flips Gruff out, and then you've got to tell the audience Hydra lost that fight.
Yeah,
right.
You have to explain
really
the live
tough.
audience, not even the people on TV. How about just the people there?
And I'm fairly certain that they did not let the live audience know that type of rule thing. They didn't really go, "Hey, everybody, these are the rules now." So they would have been like, "What?" So
I'll be really interested to know how long that rule stays in there, because honestly, it feels utterly pointless. And they didn't enforce it in this fight, so what's the point in having it?
Got to make the box safer. Then that's the solution.
There's a lot of season left to go. So
yeah,
there is.
This probably isn't the first time this happens, unfortunately.
I will say as well, like, for anyone who's kind of, because I've seen again people online say, "Oh, Jake should have done that." He's got to do it, man. You've got to take the risk.
He's still got a flipper robot.
Yeah.
What is he supposed to do?
Yeah.
In my eyes, Uta is Uta. It's one of the oldest ways of getting a knockout in any robot combat, and big up him for doing it.
Yeah,
He has the biggest kahunas.
I think a lot. I think that first out of the arena last year with Tombstone with Endgame was another reason why they decided to plug up some holes.
Yes.
Too.
And
I they couldn't
agree
turn
with
Tombstone off. They had to pull him out on.
So I agree with the idea of
the side
blocking up the sides and having that has worked really nicely. Leave the doors. You can get into robots easily at the doors, and just, if one door is blocked, you've got two doors. Go in through the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some other stuff that I would love to see, like the theory is that if you open the door, because it's like it's two stages, right? You have the big door, and then you have the low wall. And if a robot's between those, and you open the big door, and then the robot just goes, which is impossible, you now have a robot sprinting into the green room, and that's not good. But I mean, I think there's solutions to it. You could do the big door as like a 2-section door with like a top part and a low part. So if you want to open the top part, you still are covered from the chest down to stick it. Stick a fire extinguisher in there, or do whatever you need to do. There's a solution there. It's like you mentioned, it's hard to have a rule that it happens and then you don't, and then it doesn't get enforced, and it's just like, if you're gonna have it, you have to enforce it, because then if you ever do enforce it, it begs the question of, well, why didn't you enforce it there?
And the biggest thing for me is it was mentioned not at all in the show. It hasn't been brought up once yet, so for me it would seem that they are just ignoring it, and it's just a normal season for now. We will see what happens later on down the line, whether it happens, whether it doesn't, who knows. But questions will be raised if it does happen and they enforce it for something that they haven't enforced previously. As you said, inconsistency in BattleBots we know isn't the best, so we'll see.
Controversy aside, how about the rest of the fight? We barely talked about it.
It's true. I'm surprised
Hydra not really performing.
Yeah,
I would say.
One thing
weren't big.
The big takeaway I took from this fight, I don't know if this was a thing last season as well, Hydra has a little green light that lights up when it's ready to flip, and I really like that.
That was added for this season, I believe.
I think so. It seemed, I don't remember it being in previous seasons. I'm
I
surprised
think he brought it up in a comment section somewhere to say that it's been added to show when it's fully pressured, or I think the green light is on to show it's not fully pressured. I'm not sure.
One or the other.
When it goes off, it's ready. But
my other thing is, I'm surprised by Gruff's setup. Obviously, Steve, you were with the Gruff team literally Thursday.
I got to go to a watch party up north of me. It's like 10 minutes north of me they live. It's like that. Like, how could I not go? And I got to talk with both Sam and Jason and the team, and they're all really, really, really nice. And Gruff's configuration for this fight was interesting. It's interesting talking with them now because they have this setup now that they were just at South Florida Fair and they did really well. I think they won. But in any case, they have these two wedgelets on the front that hinge that weren't on for this fight.
No.
I don't know if they decided to just say screw the ground game, we're just going with our forks. But having these two little wedgelets at the front may have helped them in this instance, even if Jake is like the king of the ground game right now. What's unfortunate for one of their fire pods is after one of these flips that Hydra gives them, they land a weird way, and all their piping on the inside for all their gas to make these flamethrowers shoot flame, it's all brass. So when it falls down, one of these brass fittings just cracks and it's just leaking gas. And then once it's lit, it's a mess. They lost batteries on that one side where the fire is. It was just a cavalcade of errors, and maybe paying more attention to the ground game in this side and in this match. Maybe you're trying to get more around to the sides. It's so hard to outmaneuver Hydra. It's such a smoothly.
They did manage it for a little while. They managed to take off one of the little side skirt sections, which look like they're held on with hopes and dreams. But yeah, they managed to get them off.
It's hard to plan for falling from 7 feet in the air.
Yeah,
like you're gonna fall the wrong way and it's gonna break something. So I mean, I love how tough that robot. Gruff is a really tough robot, and I love the 1960s Batmobile like aesthetic. It's awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's so reliable that it's very interesting to see that one, because the flamethrowers have always been reliable on it. I don't think they've ever had a failure. So
and it's kind of the risk you run when you run a flamethrower, right? It's like you could flambe somebody, or it could be you know. And you can do your best to try and isolate it. Gruff is probably one of the best at doing that, of isolating the flamethrower assemblies. So if they lose it, they don't break anything else. But sometimes, I mean, it's just a fire on your robot, And
we still continue the trend of one fire per episode at least. This is episode 5.
So we had 2.
And the explosion. And the other thing with this too, I don't blame them for taking the forks off. No. If you have ground scraping stuff, you can't drive as well. You have stuff riding on the ground. You'll hit kill saw slots, you'll hit cuts on the floor.
Brandon, that was the segment before this fight.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the ground game.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that. The I had to watch the episode after the fact. But I mean, this whole thing was it's just really, really difficult. And if you're gonna go against, even with the forks or the like little wedgelet thingies on, you're never gonna beat Hydra face to face.
That's the thing. Do they try and out ground game them, or do they try and outmaneuver them? And I think they tried to go for the outmaneuver option. And
I see a lot of similarities between Gruff and us. It's like, and that's what I would do. I would put our short forks on, and say we're gonna try and circle them, because that's the one thing that if you can put it anything as a negative to Hydra, is that it's so dang good at ground game that it's almost to its own detriment at times. Gets hung up on a lot of floor seams and stuff, but you're never getting under it from the front. So you just drive circles and then hope that they get stuck and you don't.
That was what was good about that. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I mean, you'll notice with Jake, I mean, he does like to stay in the middle of the arena, and he's very conscious of where every kill saw slot is, everything. I mean, if you notice his driving, he'll stop and maneuver around it, but he's going to let you come to him and just stay in the middle. So I mean, it's very hard to get around him and really have any effective plan. You just got to hope that he makes a mistake, and unfortunately he's a really good driver, so it's
he doesn't make many, does he?
It may never come.
No, he doesn't make many mistakes at all. He's been pretty much unbeaten for the last 2 years for good reason.
Yeah.
Fight number 5. I mean, Beyblade springs to mind. With Gigabyte and Captain Shrederator.
So I saw advertised earlier, Team Just Cuz Robotics doing a breakdown, and the big headline of this, the sort of clickbaity title, is defeated by one wire. I really hope it's not that again, because the signal issues seem to be the biggest issue for Captain Shrederator, and it was literally just one hit and done.
Yeah, there wasn't much fight to discuss really for this one. And to be fair, John Mladic did not look happy, did he? After that fight, he was very much just like, yeah, we won, but it was a bit of a crap fight.
Yeah.
But a win's a win, I suppose.
It is. I mean, I'll tell you who looked more done in. Brian Nave.
Yeah, he didn't look happy, did he?
No, oh God, you got to think how many times this has happened. Like, has this happened to you? It's just, it's such a shame because Captain Shrederator's just come off of a big win against Tombstone, and to then lose with one hit against Gigabyte, you go, oh, okay, we're back to this again.
Highest of highs, lowest of lows.
Yep.
100%.
As
I mean,
we said.
really.
Yeah.
I did like the shell that Shrederator had. It was very, very smart because it was the only way to really deal with Gigabyte.
Yeah, the Freedom Wings.
What
pretty
is the
cool.
strategy there? Because we were racking our brains and trying to work out what was going on.
Yeah, I'm not
Well, I
sure
don't
either.
Yeah, I don't think he. I think he knew that Gigabyte's weapon was going to be very low, so he was just trying to go
Lower than
longer
that.
and higher to try and get maybe a portion of the shell that maybe wasn't as protected. I don't know, or maybe he was going to hop up and hit the wings at the top or something. I'm not sure, but
Possibly.
it
That's
looked-
the
it
only
looked
thing I
very
could think
cool.
was just bounce up and try and catch the fighting pole or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting strategy.
I think it was more just to give Gigabyte nothing to bite
Yeah.
at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was Gigabyte who was going flying in this fight. They
Yes.
were bouncing off and having to recover, whereas Captain Shrederator just sat there.
And then it stopped.
And sat there.
And it sat there,
Sat there.
and
Yeah.
he never
Yeah.
moved again.
I think we should move on because there's really not much to discuss. It was one hit and done.
Yeah.
In the truest
Yeah, it's
sense,
tough.
which is a shame. But I'm sure we'll see more of both. of these
Gigabyte
soon.
used their non-pretty self-rating poll because I guess they figured they were going to lose it.
Well,
in
I was
this
gonna
fight.
say, Steve, you obviously picked Gigabyte to win the whole series this year.
I
How
know.
are you feeling after 2 fights?
Quietly confident. Just it's one of those things where I just hope they get a nice third fight because with their first 2 fights, it leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, the first fight was just it's still can't believe how one-sided that was. But this fight could have been more spectacle, but hopefully they get a nice third one and they get a nice solid seeding. We'll see. They still got to win it. But we'll see. I mean, don't know.
Middle of the pack seeding would really help them out, I feel, because then they could pick off people and just
In and around
make
them.
their way up.
Kind of like they did
Unassuming,
last
like,
year.
oh, look at us,
Yeah.
a 17 seed. Ooh,
Yeah, I think they were 17 last year, weren't they?
Were they? Wow.
Yeah. Let's talk about fight number 6. Now, we mentioned Duck earlier and how it was the kind of antithesis of the kind of plastic revolution, I suppose, coming to BattleBots, and it's just one solid piece of metal, and the front 2 kind of. Well, they looked plastic, but they were getting chipped away. But I think they are aluminium now. The more I think about it, against the rookie Dragon Slayer, and Dragon Slayer did the thing, and it smashed Duck's bill. It was brutal. Just
I must
watching.
say, Duck's bill looked like it was made of corrugated cardboard in this fight.
Honest.
It really did. Dragon Slayer just went through it. And
It surprised
what
me.
happened?
It surprised me how
What has
easy it
happened to
was.
Duck?
It's a shame.
There was seemingly no way of defending against this vert. They have the long forks they could have used and could have tried to get underneath. Didn't employ them in this fight. It was just this setup that you can see on screen, and it's just I question it because what are you going to do with this setup? You go down the middle and get hit by the vert, which is what happened, and then it broke. I suppose the idea is don't break, but
it's easier said than done. I mean, to be
Exactly.
fair, I will give Dragon Slayer credit. It was very well controlled for a first time heavyweight.
First time any bot. This is
really?
their first entry into robot combat, and they've done supremely well.
Yeah, Spinner's not an easiest designer machine to go with for the first robot, and they took it to Duck, and the fight kind of dragged on a little bit. It went for 3 minutes, and there was a lot of
it wasn't the
Yeah.
fastest fight.
You had Kenny talking about
Chinese
Chinese food, and yeah. I mean, hey, duck is pretty good. Peking duck is probably my
Oh, yeah.
favorite
It's damn good.
dish ever. Stuff's really good, but 45 seconds of Kenny
Lot
just
of
listing
filler.
ways to cook duck
Yeah.
was pretty
A
interesting.
lot of filler.
Yeah,
I'll,
I mean,
I'll bring
as-
back the spirit of Anderson and just say, did you mean that this fight, or would you say that this fight drag on?
Oh Jesus.
That's going to get there. So,
As
yeah.
far as this fight, the stuff I'd like to say about it, as far as Dragon Slayer, the disc is gorgeous.
Mm,
Oh my
the
God.
art,
I don't
beautiful.
even know how it was done, if it was a wrap or what, but it's really, really pretty.
It's painted. It was hand painted.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Unreal.
it's painted.
Yeah.
Put that
it
much
was-
work in, no way it's going to get destroyed on one hit. It's
Right?
Give this person an art masters.
But yeah, I mean, and they drove really well. They drove exactly how they needed to. But yeah, I mean, Duck, like, oh, come on. It's rough. It's just painful.
is.
And especially as a lifter driver, you're like the last two fights, like probably the two other robots that you'd say were the most similar to is probably Gruff and Duck. And when if you lose the bill,
What have you
you
got?
don't even have a pointy bit of steel on the front of your robot. Like that's the nice thing about us is that if we lose the lifter, we still have an angly bit of steel on the front of the robot.
Mm.
But when you're just kind of like block front, it's hard. I don't know why they didn't run wedgelets of any kind. I don't know. Maybe because they fought Witch Doctor, right? And they got cut off. Maybe
got clipped. Yep.
Yeah, maybe they fought that fight and they're like, man, these aren't working. But I thought that was your best shot against Dragon Slayer, and it just went poorly. I think watching those fights, I didn't talk to them at all this year, but I feel like they must have been having some driving issue because Hal is a really, really good driver. And it just felt like it wasn't driving. You mean, especially the Witch Doctor fight, watch the first 5 seconds of the Witch Doctor fight. And it's like,
It's sort of turning
Yeah,
and not.
yeah,
It looks wrong.
I recall he if I recall correctly, he goes at him and then just does a 180 and drives right into the screws. And I'm like,
That's not right.
It was very, very uncharacteristic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like a situation where it's something that I've had on our brushless motors at times, which is like you drive forward and then you let go of the stick and then the motor spin for like a second and a half and then they stop. Maybe it felt like something that way where he tried to turn and he overturned because the motors kept going. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but it feels like it's not driving right. And I said this earlier, when you're driving a lifter, and you're fighting a vertical spinner, you cannot mess up once. You have to drive 3 minutes perfectly, because otherwise, the mess up against Witch Doctor happened immediately. It overturned and the wedgelet was off, and the fight was basically over.
Yeah.
Even though Witch Doctor's weapon eventually did break, the damage was so far in their favor that it was over.
Yep.
And then in this fight too, it was like once they lost the bill, it was hard. I mean, maybe you go in with the butt end and try and break the weapon first and then go in with the bill. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Then
it
you
here
run
too.
the risk of the damage points adding up and.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Well,
other thing too, the other thing too is that, especially at BattleBots, that the hardest thing is that you can't test this stuff.
No.
They're like people giving Duck crap for the bill not being strong enough. It's like you can't test this.
No.
And there's no way to simulate some people have done have figured out pretty darn good ways to simulate how impacts, like BattleBots level impacts, but it's hard. It's really, really freaking hard to get a simulation of this. It's not like it's like, oh, go out and test to see if the bill's gonna break off. But then you go to BattleBots and the bill just breaks off
energy
immediately,
levels
and you're
go
just
up.
stuck.
Yeah, of course.
Be like,
Well, I mean-
our armor is bulletproof. You'll get more of that than that in the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was like our Copperhead fight last year. It was like I talked about with the wedge. It's like you put it in, and then the wedge gets blown off its mooring, and it's like, oh, if we fight another vertical spinner, it's gonna knock the wedge off.
Yeah.
That's not good. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's to some degree, there's just like, well, that's what the design was. Like you can try and reinforce it as best you can. But it's like, especially with Duck's bill, it's like there's not much you can do.
That bill is very, I mean, at the very tip of it is very thin with a lot of surface area. So, I mean, it's, and the thing that's kind of shocking to me, at least seeing it, is that Dragon Slayer, and this isn't a knock at them, is their first time out there, but it didn't seem like a ridiculously powerful spin up or hit. It just chipped away real slowly.
It wasn't storing a lot of energy.
My
It didn't seem like that.
My other theory, potentially with Duck's bill, is obviously we heard a lot about S7 and IR in the last few weeks with regard to Witch Doctor, of course. They had their weapon issues last season. Maybe it was something similar to that. I don't know. But not a good fight for Duck. A great fight for Dragon Slayer. Yeah, good for them to win their first fight. It's very impressive.
They have unfortunately got a bit of a steep hill to climb if you've checked out the BattleBots website and know who their next fight is against.
Oops.
Because,
Yeah.
Could be very
I
spicy.
don't even remember. You guys know more than me.
I don't remember
a certain
either.
Brazilian bull.
Could be steep learning curve.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Enjoy your verts.
You call that a spinner? This is a spinner.
Let's talk about another couple of spinners. But we've talked about Valkyrie already. The YouTube fight for this week, we are recording on a Sunday. Spoiler. I've now dated
With
this episode.
rookie Triple Crown, this is not a rookie.
It's
a rookie
machine.
bot, not a rookie builder.
No, Todd
They
has been
don't
around
mention
for a long
him
time.
at all being
It's so
a previous
annoying.
competitor.
Is it?
It's like,
Are they just like against talking about other shows? I know they kind of bring up China and they bring up this, that, and the other. This guy has multiple championships under his belt
Mhm.
from multiple different events.
Can
Put
I
some
just
respect
say,
on his name.
very, very
Ran
unfortunate
over.
draw for Triple Crown
Oh
to
my
fight
God, this is terrible.
Valkyrie. Like it's a beautifully engineered robot Triple Crown. It has the swerve drive, which we
This
mentioned.
machine is absolutely gorgeous in person. Like functionally, the way everything works, especially those drive pods, are amazing. It's like, why did you bring this here to get destroyed?
Right.
It's so nice.
It's a Techno Games
Well,
robot.
I've heard. Somebody has left I left a comment on the YouTube video that came out today, and somebody has replied to it. And I'm going to read out their comment because it's got some really interesting behind the scenes information about Triple Crown, which I wasn't aware of. So it was built in a short period of time, and Todd said he cancelled coming this year because of the time shortage in one of his videos. He still came because Greg invited him. He came to do one fight and just test his bot, which he did, and it worked, and it was matched against Valkyrie. and that was
Of all
the end
robots
of
to
it,
fight,
yeah.
you know, it's not a pleasant one.
But I mean, watching it move around the arena,
So
God,
cool.
this thing is lovely.
it's the way-
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I think the time thing. I think he was. I could be totally wrong if this is just off memory, but I believe he was in for season 5, and he was like up against it for season 5, and then he didn't end up coming. Like a lot of teams, it didn't come. Like Duck also didn't come last year. It was right up against it for season 5, and then came back for this season. So I think it was almost ready for season 5. I think I could be wrong about that, but that's my recollection.
Mhm.
As far as this fight, I mean, I just felt bad when I saw the card. I was like, oh man, you're kidding me, because it's. I mean.
it's a
It's
mismatch,
just
isn't it?
brutal.
Really?
It's like
Yeah.
I wanted to see them give the Triple Crown, like, I don't know, like a deadlift.
Yeah.
I think would be a
Something-
cool, like a
yeah.
lifter, like Gruff deadlift, something like that.
Yeah.
Something that's not gonna just vaporize you. It's just hard. It's just I really thought it would have been fun. Maybe like Sub-Zero. I'm looking at the team list right now to think of
just to
who
show
would
off
be fun.
just to show off the functionality of it. Maybe another
Yeah.
first-time rookie bot or something, you know, to kind of yeah.
It's kind of a
That's a tough
disservice
cross.
to the
That's a tough
community to
match
not
there
have it,
for him.
to
Having
not have it work.
spoken about this robot for so long before seeing it and not understanding it, it's so wonderful to finally understand it and see the potential in it. Because actually, if you manage to scale this down a bit, the wheelbase and everything, you could then have some more weight to make, you know, a big, thicker wedge on one side and a sort of better mounted spinner on another. It could work really nicely. And it's certainly something very different. Of course, if you end up getting those wheels cut out from under you, that's not ideal. But
I mean, if you look at this as a proof of concept, and you could bury those wheels inside something and make it more compact, this could be the answer to Omni, you know, an answer to the alternative to an Omni wheel. I mean,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really is.
No, it's cool. It's definitely the coolest drivetrain at this event by a factor of 10. It's really cool. It's just,
Perfect
and
drive
I mean,
system.
it's just so. I mean, and looking it up close, and Todd has some unbelievably good videos online. I don't think they have many views, so if you haven't watched them, you should go watch
There's
them.
like
I'm
60
gonna have
hours
to
of
find
video or
his YouTube
something, but
channel.
yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievably impressive, and just to see it get fed to Valkyrie immediately, it was just sad. Like, come on, like, I mean, I'm just looking like Claw Viper, Overhaul, Ghost Raptor, like some teams that even teams with spinners that don't really have like crazy powerful spinners, like them, or like Whiplash.
Rampage.
I mean,
Yeah, Rampage.
Honest, anything,
Yeah.
it's it just felt so
anything
bad.
but an undercutter.
Yeah, no kidding.
Very, very rude. But hopefully we'll see more of Triple Crown next season. But you know, I would be surprised if I'd be a bit put off by.
We
by
got
coming
to
back.
see it, and we should be appreciative that we got to see it.
Yes.
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 For the short time we got to see it, at least we got to see
Don't
it.
be sad it's over. Be happy that it happened.
There you go.
Our main event was, which is your favourite vert? Is it the orange one or the green one? It was, do you know what? Okay, one thing I will say before kind of dissecting the fight a little bit more, I was very impressed that Mike kind of didn't go for the initial full send and kind of tried to circle endgame at the start. I kind of thought for
It was a cagey start for both.
I was just what I was thinking, Jevin. That's the exact word.
Neither of them really wanted to engage with the other, quite rightly, because both of their weapons are potentially one-hit KOs if you catch them a certain way. Did anyone else get a little bit 2019 final vibes as well?
Yeah, they were winning the first part of this fight. They were clipping off forks, and then all of a sudden, it all went pants.
Yeah.
There is, if you watch the slow-mo back, there is a wonderful shot where Endgame hits them up, and they come back down. They hit them, and then Witch Doctor bounces backwards, and just where that chain is for their self-righter is hit by the weapon.
Yep.
And I think that's where it kills it, because obviously their weapon, as you said earlier, is still going, the wheels are still going, but they can't self-right. And it's interesting as well, because this version of Witch Doctor has the horns, because that was going to be their backup plan.
Yeah.
But clearly something has happened there.
I think the rear wheels were dead, because they were spinning their wheels while they were upside down, and at the start of the fight, I think one of the two wedges on Witch Doctor got pinned in because it wasn't driving.
The left front one on one of the hits that Endgame
Correct.
gives him just pins that whole front side in, and then they're just it's not even like that side was dead. It was just pinned.
It was hindered enough that made
happen.
Endgame. It gave Endgame the impetus to go and win it, really. And
Yeah.
Endgame wasn't all smooth sailing though. Had the sort of longer forks end up going.
They went limp. It was kind of peculiar to watch.
Their springs. They have a breakdown video every week of. Well, they have a preview for the fight and a breakdown after the fight on their Facebook page. I implore you to go and check it out if you're interested in the workings of this bot. But they spoke about their springs and the changes that they would make for the springs on this setup because they didn't work out for them. I can't remember what they've done to them, but I know that they spoke about it.
They sure did.
Endgame this was just a slugfest. I mean, it really was. And if you just watching it back, and I've watched it right before, we got on here again, Mike is an excellent driver in terms of squaring up. Like the second he hits the ground, he's immediately facing them again. Like there's no point, like he drove as good as he possibly could have driven. It's just hammer versus, you're hitting each other. Eventually something's going to give. And that's, flipping a coin.
And when you go with a reach vert instead of a wedge vert, when you go with reach and try and just outreach your opponent and they have you in wedge you're going to lose every front to front wedge game. So you hope you hit them before they hit you. It's just really hard. And Endgame knows that all they have to do is point the weapon at you and they will kill you. So I'm watching it right now. I'm trying to like identify anything, and it's hard because it's like, just Endgame. It hits them with the disc a whole bunch of times, and then they break.
Like, that one hit. There's that one hit on the chain. That's really it. Like when they're upside down against the shelf and coming back down, there's like one little clip where I think they clip the chain on that self-righter, and then that's the end of it. It's not even all the big hits. It's not the two big hits where one sends one wedge completely flying in the other direction, and then another hit where it just sends Witch Doctor into convulsions in the air. No, it was just a little one, just a little well-placed hit right on that chain, on that self-rider.
They came to really bring the pain again this year. The amount of weapons they brought, like they just had a stack of weapons at their table. And it's just
fresh one for every fight.
No problem. Oh yeah, literally. They had enough to do every fight. Easily. If they wanted to put a fresh one on every fight, they could have. And it's scary. They're very big. They're very thick. And they can definitely do some damage for sure, obviously. So They came to defend the crown. That's for sure.
Yeah, they've also moved to 2-0 as well, and you kind of think, it's a bit ominous when last season they kind of obviously they beat Tombstone, then they got beaten by Bloodsport and kind of recovered from there. It's very ominous when they're turning up and just at a canter winning against. Okay, it wasn't easy. Let's not make any mistake, but it seemed simple enough for them to turn over Witch Doctor and kind of turn it on. And
this is the second big name they've taken out. You've got to think. The winner of last year is going on to be number one seed in the preseason.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like,
unless they
champion that
lose.
doesn't lose all year. That's the
Yeah.
thing. They have to lose to fall out, but it's their loss if they lose. Like they have
It's theirs
they
to
have
lose.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah, totally. I mean, and they drove as well as they could. The robot doesn't break. Like I said, it's the going back and watching season 1 or season 2 and then watching now, it's insane how much better the robots are. You can't just rely on your opponent breaking anymore.
No.
And not to say that it was like, oh well, everyone just stunk then, but the reliability. I want to say that
machine has improved over the years.
Oh yeah, I don't want to say that as a slight on people who did it before. I want to say that as a compliment to the people doing it now, because it's so unbelievably impressive how long and how hard robots can, like how hard of hits they can deal with and how long they can go in a fight and just keep on going. And robots that are not even like, it's the word durable gets thrown around a lot, and robots that are known as like durable robots or something. It's just everyone. They all are like everybody's good, and it's just insane how much better everybody has gotten. And you even just literally look at Endgame alone. I mean, Endgame, I think at one point was like 2 and. No, didn't they have like a long loss streak?
They had to go through the Desperado, didn't they, in 2019? And they only won one round of that. They lost to Minotaur and then they beat Cobalt. But even then, they were 1-3 that year. I think
they were 1-3 plus whatever they were in Desperado, which was 1 and.
Yeah, and then I think they had one of the longer losing streaks, and then they kept at it. And they kept coming back year after year and got better and better and better.
Look at 2018 Endgame compared to now. They're worlds apart. They are. It's just Endgame is a scary machine. It's a bad matchup.
It's the new Daft robot.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
That's not Bite Force.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing too, like you mentioned, is the prep. You win fights before you even go to Vegas, and what I mean by that is the better you are prepared, the better you're going to do.
Yep.
And so they are probably one of the most prepared teams, and they have a great driver and great robot, and it's when you have a great archetype and you prepare, and they have a great design. And they're on the peak of anything in the entire sport. So, I mean, right now they're probably, like you said, it's their number 1 seed to lose. Yep. So they're on the top of it.
We will see. Brandon and Anthony, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
To speak.
Great.
With that said, though, I have been Samuelit64.
I've been Steve the American Killjoy.
I have been World of Woodrow.
I'm Tony with P1.
And I'm Brandon with P1.
And the three of us will see you next week for more BattleBots reviews. We'll see you then.